naturally, when you are, doing buy and hold, you are at that phase of either hitting maturity in your portfolio or having a portfolio that is not efficient enough to generate the yields or the growth that you are intending to get. And so the banks have said no to you and you can't transitioning it out. And so if you don't have a strategy in place, if you haven't thought this through, then you are stuck. And so the only strategy that you would follow is, okay, I need to sell something out of my portfolio or just suck it up and, ride the wave, be it interest rate rises, right?
Yeah.
And so for people to transition, it's important that you have these properties in your portfolio where where you can manufacture the equity and still keep moving the profile forward. Okay, so you don't get stuck into anything. When you have a sustainable property portfolio, I'll use a very simple example from one of my clients' perspective. And so they had the portfolio at the start when they started off. One of the properties that they had in their portfolio was quite bad and performed and did nothing over the last sort of 7 years. They bought something in 2015, did nothing for them, all the way up to 2022. They had some properties that did really well, but that particular property didn't do anything well. And so they were stuck from a bank's perspective that there is no serviceability, they can't move forward. And so their natural instinct was, okay, I'll sell the bad eggs, right? Because that's what you do. You don't want to sell the good stuff, you want to sell the bad stuff. But just like you bought the bad stuff at the wrong time, no one wants to buy a bad stuff because there is a lot of educated investors out there who knows that,
Yeah.
okay, this is not an investment grade property. And so they spend close to about $8,000 speaking to two agents, marketing it again and again, trying to sell it, right? And so
Yeah.
when they
Interesting. Yeah.
came to me super frustrated, banks keep saying no, and they are super stuck. And so my question to them was, yes, you want to get rid of this, but there are these two other properties. Have you thought about how to push the yields on some of these properties, right? And so one of these properties was in Perth. And so we looked at that property, we helped them convert their property and push the yield literally from 4% all the way to 8.5%. Okay. And so that gave them a bit of, liquidity on their, borrowing side of things. And that gave them enough money to basically say, okay, how do we now look at this property, which is a bad property, and offload it? And so over the period of, I think, 6 months or 8 months time, they put plans on their property to make it a bit more nicer. Okay, staged the property and then offloaded it on a 6 month settlement, and that property basically settled last year, mid last year, and that was the way that the property portfolio was remediated while pushing the yields up on their already, and I call it manufactured equity again. And so developments doesn't have to be with a big bang, and now they have liquidity and the serviceability to play forward. And so these are the
Yeah.
properties that
That's
we're
great.
talking about. Yeah. And so when you're
Yeah.
talking
Absolutely.
about transitions, you're talking about taking the next step, continuously moving in the same direction rather than feeling stuck. There is a lot of people that I'm talking to, especially right now in a scenario like this, where they've caught a lot of growth. Okay, in this particular client that I'm thinking about, they've caught so much growth in their portfolio, but because there were always cash flow strain, they are feeling the burn. And now every property is costing them close to about 14, and one property in itself costing about $18,000 a year to hold. And so they're like,
Yeah. Ouch.
like three properties in total is costing them like close to about $60,000. Okay. And I was like, well, that's a lot of money, right? Because this is disposable income that you're paying out to hold these properties. And now, so their instinct is, okay, I can't do anything with these properties because I need to sell in order to salvage. And again, same mentality. I'll find the worst property to sell so that I can get out. But that worst property, no one wants to buy. And so that's, you need to break
Yeah.
that cycle. And the cycle only gets broken by having properties that you can manufacture equity on. And so we've talked about, the risks. We've talked about, where it makes sense for people to transition. We've talked about people, what happens to people who resist the change. But it's important to understand how to transition from these buy and hold strategies to buy and develop strategies. Now, of course, it's continuous improvement. It's baby steps, right? And so the key point where we start is always buy and hold. It's not so much about, you thinking that, you're going to start with development, right? Everyone, when you start off your property journey, it has to be, as a first time investor, it has to be buy and hold, right?
Oh, I mean, I guess we've had some people who have gone from, they just dive straight in and it might be renovation or anything. I'd say the majority of us start off with, and that's what we've been told: buy a property, rent it out, or buy a property, live in it. I mean, Australians absolutely love affair with property.